Hello everyone, I'm Crime Whisper. I know many of you enjoy listening to these stories as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment telling me where in the world you're tuning in from and if you enjoy tonight's case. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. 1. Imagine this. A viper strikes and then slithers away, leaving only its venom behind. That's exactly how this case felt. Sudden, shocking attack that left behind poison, confusion, and grief. This story shook Mexico, the Catholic Church, and thousands of parishioners who couldn't understand why anyone would want to kill a young deacon. Even more disturbing, the main suspect was a priest who had served the church for over 20 years. This is the chilling case of Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos for more than 15 years. Father Francisco was the pastor of Cristo Salvador Catholic Church in Mexico City's Miguel Hidalgo neighborhood. He wasn't just a priest, he was a community figure. He prayed with the sick, attended local events, and became known for something unusual. His healing rituals and even exorcisms. Parishioners lined up outside the church on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, waiting hours just to be blessed by him. Parents brought photos of missing or addicted children. The sick came seeking relief, and a few even claimed he drove out demons. His reputation grew so much that he appeared on television, wrote a book, and became known across Mexico for his supposed powers. At his side was a woman named Gil, who parishioners believed had a spiritual gift of her own. Together they performed rituals that many swore brought miracles. But Father Francisco wasn't only about the supernatural. He lived closely with his community, organizing sports events, celebrations, and local improvements to his parishioners. He was more than a priest, he was a shepherd of souls. And then came Hugo Leonardo Avendaño, known as Leo, born in 1990. Leo was intelligent, kind, and deeply committed to the Catholic faith from a young age. He wanted to serve, and after years of study in theology and psychotherapy, he became Father Francisco's right hand. They worked together for years. Parishioners saw them as a strong team: an older priest with decades of service and a young deacon with a bright future. But no one could have predicted the tragedy that was about to unfold. The bond between Father Francisco and Leo grew even stronger in 2015. When Leo officially became his deacon, he was cheerful, devoted, and always eager to help not only the priest but also the entire community. Because of their close relationship, it was common for the two men to meet late into the night, often working on parish matters until the early morning hours. The last time Leo's brother, Josu, heard from him was on Tuesday, June 11, 2019. That evening, Leo had gone to meet with Father Francisco. He was last seen wearing blue pants, a light-colored shirt, and black shoes. By the next morning, June 12th, Josu grew worried Leo hadn't returned home, and calls to his phone went unanswered. His concern deepened when Father Francisco himself called to say Leo never showed up at the church as planned. At that time, Mexico City was gripped by fear. In just the first half of 2019, nearly 700 homicides had been recorded, along with dozens of kidnappings and femicides. To recent cases, the killings of students Aide Mendoza and Norberto Ronquillo had already shaken the public. Against this backdrop of violence and uncertainty, Josu rushed to the prosecutor's office to report his brother missing. He explained that Leo had gone to Cristo Salvador Catholic Church the night before, around 11 p.m., to meet with the priest. He even told investigators the exact route Leo usually took from his home in Iztapalapa to the church, hoping it would help them trace his steps. He also shared that Leo had sent a message to a friend on June 11th, saying he'd be spending the night at Father Francisco's house. But while Josu was filing that report, something chilling was already unfolding elsewhere. That same morning, June 12th, police received a call about a suspicious car abandoned in the Heroes D 1910 neighborhood. When officers arrived, they found a gray Chevrolet parked on Eucalypto Street. Inside, covered with a yellow blanket, was the lifeless body of a young man. Investigators immediately noted signs of brutal violence to the face, missing teeth, and indications of suffocation. Forensic analysis later confirmed the victim's identity: Hugo Leonardo Avendago Chavez. Just 29 years old, his life had been taken after a savage beating and strangulation. With that confirmation, Leo's disappearance case shifted from missing persons to homicide. Grief and outrage swept through the community. Family, friends, classmates, and parishioners organized protests, demanding answers. University students from across Mexico, UNA, IPNP Dragel, and others, released a powerful video online, calling for justice, not just for Leo, but for the thousands of victims across the country. Their message was clear: they wanted the right to study, work, and live without fear. Thursday, June 13th, 2019. Leo's body was taken to Cristo Salvador Catholic Church for his funeral wake that night. Father Francisco himself presided over the Mass for his deacon. Speaking to the media afterward, he lamented the violence plaguing Mexico, saying, "There are wolves among us. It's not only these two students being shown on television. What about the others? The parents, the children, all the people suffering this daily reality?" His words struck deep, but no one yet knew that very soon the finger of suspicion would turn toward Father Francisco himself. Robberies, kidnappings, and violent crimes had become a daily occurrence in Mexico City, leaving parents, children, and entire communities living in constant fear. During his public statements, Father Francisco spoke calmly about the situation. He said authorities needed to do their job, but also involve citizens in the effort to reduce crime. Many expected him to be devastated after losing his closest companion, Deacon Leo. Instead, the priest's calm tone and composed appearance surprised people. No one could have imagined that behind this peaceful, charismatic figure, dark secrets were about to surface. Just 3 days after Leo's funeral mass, authorities issued an arrest warrant for Father Francisco. Investigators claimed to have indisputable evidence linking him to the crime. On June 16, a judge approved the warrant, and by June 19, 2019, the priest was arrested and transferred to the Orient Men's Prison in Mexico City. Surveillance footage told a chilling story. Cameras showed Leo driving his car into Cristo Salvador Catholic Church a little after 11 p.m. on June 11th at 3:16 a.m. He left this time, accompanied by Father Francisco. Minutes later, cameras captured the same car traveling toward the area where Leo's body was eventually found. Another vehicle followed, and footage revealed Francisco boarding it before leaving the scene. Investigators also confirmed that around 10 p.m. that night, Leo had texted a friend saying he would spend the night at the priest's house. Even more damning, when police checked Father Francisco's belongings, they discovered the keys to Leo's vehicle in his possession. Despite this mountain of evidence, Francisco denied everything. He told Leo's brother Josu that the deacon never showed up at the church that night. Many parishioners, however, refused to believe the accusations. They organized protests, insisting that the priest was innocent. One woman told reporters, "This is terribly unfair. They're crucifying a just man, an incomparable man." Others echoed her outrage, calling the case a smear campaign against a beloved figure. But rumors spread quickly. Some media outlets claimed compromising photos were found on Leo's tablet, suggesting extortion or even a crime of passion. Authorities publicly dismissed those theories, confirming the case was being investigated strictly as a homicide. Still, investigative journalist Lourdes Munguia revealed on live television that the true motive might not have been passion, but money. She reported that Leo may have uncovered irregularities in the church's finances, and investigators believed this could have led to his death. What complicated matters further was Leo's lifestyle. Despite being a full-time student with no steady income, other than a monthly allowance of about 10,000 pesos from his late mother, he lived far beyond his means. He had taken expensive trips to places like Miami, Switzerland, and even the Middle East. He drove a new luxury car, carried the latest smartphone, and somehow managed expenses that no ordinary student could explain. All of this raised new questions. Was Leo financing his lifestyle through hidden means? Had he stumbled onto financial secrets within the parish? And most importantly, did what he discovered seal his fate? Leo had recently planned to rent an apartment near the parish, with a monthly rent of about 6,000 pesos, roughly $350. He had even invited his family to visit the new place on Friday, June 14, 2019, but that day never came because someone took his life as the investigation unfolded. Disturbing financial details began to emerge. Authorities discovered that Leo had large amounts of cash, active bank accounts, and regular transfers, many of them traced directly back to Father Francisco. The deeper investigators dug, the more entangled the priest seemed to be in the young deacon's mysterious lifestyle. But despite the growing evidence, Francisco never wavered from his claims of innocence. He refused to answer questions about Leo's money, denied all accusations, and calmly told reporters and parishioners that he had nothing to do with the death. Defenders quickly rallied to his side. Former church spokesman Father Hugo Valdemar visited Francisco in prison, accusing authorities of manipulating evidence and vowing that defense attorneys would prove his innocence. His lawyers insisted that the surveillance footage wasn't enough to convict him, and parishioners flooded the streets in protest, carrying banners, chanting, and blocking avenues while demanding his release. Some were so enraged, they even threatened journalists for covering the story. But behind the protests, the legal process pressed on. More than a year later, in December 2020, the first hearings began inside Orient Prison. Both sides presented evidence, prosecution and defense alike. Some locals remained in disbelief, saying the priest they once admired could never be guilty of such a crime. Others quietly distanced themselves from the church, unsettled by the accusations. Finally, in April 2021, after carefully weighing the evidence, the court declared Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos guilty of Leo's murder. The verdict was unanimous. The case against him was Saladon. April 9, 2021. Francisco was sentenced to 27 years and 6 months in prison for aggravated homicide. He was also ordered to pay more than 422,000 pesos, around $25,000, in reparations to Leo's family. The court ruled he would serve the full sentence, with no possibility of reduced benefits. Even then, Francisco stood firm. He maintained that he had been in his bedroom that night, swore he had nothing to do with the killing, and vowed to appeal the decision. But the evidence told a different story. His cell phone and Leo's were both traced to the same locations throughout that night, including the area where Leo's body was found. And the final damning detail: the keys to Leo's vehicle were discovered in the priest's possession. For many, a church is a place of refuge, peace, and healing, but in this case, it became the stage for betrayal, secrecy, and a devastating crime. Leo's brother Josu said it best back in 2019 when he pleaded for justice. Help us uncover the truth. Help us ensure that those responsible pay for what they've done. Justice may have been served, but the pain left behind for the Avendago family is immeasurable, and it serves as a haunting reminder of how darkness can sometimes hide behind the very walls meant to shelter. The light story to how much hatred does it take for someone to kill an entire family, including a 4-year-old child? That was the chilling question asked by a passerby in 1998. After stumbling upon a crime so brutal it left even seasoned investigators speechless. Now, let's travel back to Jiangsu, China, February 12, 1998, at 4 a.m. to uncover a murder that shocked the nation. The morning of February 12, 1998, felt strangely different in Kama Village, Dantu District, Gangsu Province. At dawn, 53-year-old Mrs. Jiang stepped outside to prepare vegetables for the market. The cool air usually carried the scent of morning dew, but that day, she smelled smoke. Puzzled, she looked toward the southeast, and froze. A house was engulfed in flames. It was the home of Xiaowen's family. Without hesitation, Mrs. Jiang shouted, "Fire! There's a fire!" Her cries roused the villagers. who rushed to help, but by then, the blaze had already consumed the wooden home by 5:40 a.m. Police arrived at the scene. The fire had been so fierce that the house was reduced to ashes inside the rubble. Investigators discovered 5 charred bodies: Xiao An, 55, his wife, Lei Qi, 50, their daughter, Xiao Qingqing, 22, their daughter, Long Kui, 29, and 1 young grandchild. But something didn't add up. Neighbors recalled that 7 people lived in the household, yet only 5 bodies were found too. Family members had left the house days earlier and survived this detail immediately placed suspicion on one person, the daughter, Wang Kikyo, for 7 years. Wang had endured humiliation under her in-laws' roof. Her marriage to their son ended in tragedy when he died after a work accident. Ever since, Lei Qi blamed her, treating her with contempt, though she stayed for the sake of her young daughter. Arguments were frequent and bitter. Just 2 days before the fire, another quarrel broke out when the grandchildren fought over a toy. Lei Qi scolded Wang's daughter, harshly. Enraged, she struck the child, then expelled both Wang and her daughter from the house that very evening. That fight may have saved their lives. The police confronted Wang in her hometown of Jingguo district, 20 kilometers away. When she learned of the fire, she collapsed, speechless. She insisted she had been staying with her parents for 2 days, and witnesses confirmed it. The journey back to Kama was over an hour by car. Impossible to make secretly, while carrying the 20-liter gasoline can police found near the crime scene. Still, suspicion lingered. Her motive was clear, but the evidence was not. The Xiao family's home was destroyed, their valuables untouched, and their lives stolen in the fire that someone had set deliberately, with everything still in its place. Investigators confirmed there were no signs of theft. However, they did find a plastic gasoline can at the scene, believed to have been left by the perpetrator. Fingerprint analysis revealed nothing, suggesting the killer had worn gloves. The forensic team then completed the autopsy's examination of the victims' stomachs, uncovered a large amount of sleeping pills in the adults' systems, but not in the stomach of the 4-year-old child. This clue was critical in a rural household. A child usually ate the same meals as the adults, so which dish contained the sleeping pills, and why hadn't the child eaten it? Organizing the clues, police reached several conclusions. First, the motive was almost certainly revenge. Second, the perpetrator was someone very familiar, likely close to the Zhao family, and possibly even present during their dinner on February 11th, secretly slipping the sleeping pills into the food before setting the blaze. Third, though less likely, police considered the possibility of arson. Suicide, carried out by a family member. The team split into 2 groups to begin inquiries soon. The Xiao family's reputation came into focus. Neighbors described Xiao Mayan as hot-tempered, domineering, and quarrelsome. His wife, Lei Qi, was equally disliked, aggressive, gossiping, and constantly speaking ill of her daughters-in-law and sons-in-law together. They had created conflicts with nearly everyone around them. Among their many disputes, one stood out. A year earlier, a neighbor named Song Xin, age 52, had become their bitter enemy after his cow wandered into Xiao Mayan's cornfield without warning. Xiao killed the cow and turned it into a feast for the villagers. When Song Xin discovered the truth, Xiao not only refused to apologize, but mocked him, warning that if it happened again, he wouldn't let it go so lightly. To a farmer, a cow is invaluable. The loss, paired with Xiao's insults, enraged Song Xin. Days later, he retaliated by throwing cow dung into Xiao's house, sparking a heated confrontation so severe that the village chief built a fence between the 2 homes for over a year. The 2 families feuded constantly, exhausting the entire village. Naturally, the police couldn't ignore Song Xin when questioned. He sighed. "I knew you'd suspect me, yes. I hated him, but I would never kill his entire family, and certainly not a child." His alibi checked out. He'd been at home with relatives on the night of the fire, so he was temporarily ruled out. Yet Song Xin revealed something important: tension between the Zhao family and their son-in-law, Ling Shisha, 25, who also perished. and the fireling was married to Xiao Qingqing, one of the daughters considered weak since childhood. Ling earned a modest wage comparable to the village women. His in-laws scorned him for it during meals. Both Xiao and Lakey openly mocked him, while even his wife dismissed him over time. Ling became a shadow in his own home, tolerated but never respected. To avoid constant humiliation, he spent long hours outside working, and returned home late. The only person who treated him kindly was his sister-in-law Wang Qia, who understood his struggles because her position in the family was just as difficult. They supported one another quietly, which soon drew suspicion. Xiao Qingqing grew jealous and pressured her mother to scold Wang, while she berated her husband, demanding distance, though the closeness ended. Ling and Wang Qia still sympathized with each other when asked. Wang Qia firmly denied any romantic involvement, insisting their bond was only built on empathy. Still, police formed a chilling hypothesis. Ling Shisha, humiliated for years, may have decided to end his suffering by destroying the family that tormented him. He could have slipped sleeping pills into the food, waited until everyone was unconscious, and then set the fire out of respect for Wang Qia, the only one who showed him kindness. He may have chosen a moment when she and her daughter were absent. The theory fit the evidence, but one detail troubled investigators: Ling's young son. By all accounts, Ling loved the boy dearly. Could a father who adored his child truly burn him alive? Then came another clue. A man named Lun, a 28-year-old truck driver, told police he'd seen Ling outside the house around 1 a.m., returning home from work. Lun passed by and noticed Ling standing alone in the yard. At that moment, there was no fire. Thinking nothing of it, Lun continued home to rest. If Lun's account was true, it deepened suspicion. Why was Ling awake and outside at such an hour, while the rest of the household was asleep? The pieces were aligning, but the question remained: was Ling truly the architect of this tragedy, or just another victim? In rural China, families often eat dinner early, around 6 or 7 p.m., and go to bed not long after. If someone slipped them sleeping pills, the drugs would still be active well past midnight. That's why Ling Shisha, being awake and outside at 1 or 2 a.m., raised suspicions, suggesting he hadn't taken the pills at all. Investigators believed this supported their theory, and after days of inquiry, they closed the case, naming Ling Shisha as the culprit who acted out of revenge against his in-laws. But not everyone agreed. Some detectives argued the evidence was too thin, especially since they never got a direct confession. They decided to keep a quiet watch. February 24th, officers returned to the charred ruins with sniffer dogs, hoping for missed evidence, but all they found was ash and twisted metal. Just then, Mrs. Jiang, the woman who first spotted the fire, noticed them and casually said, "Still investigating? I thought the case was already closed. You people are really hard-working. If you need help, just ask. We've all been out here searching these past few days." The remark stunned police. This was their first time back at the scene. Who else had been searching, as she claimed? When pressed, Mrs. Jiang revealed that Wang Qia had been revisiting the ruins repeatedly. Why? The fire was nearly 2 weeks old. The investigation mostly wrapped up, yet Wang Qia kept returning. Police began to wonder if she was hiding something. They discreetly looked into her movements. At first, they thought it impossible. Wang Qia lived 20 kilometers away in Zhengzhou. She couldn't even ride a motorcycle, and lugging 20 liters of gasoline would draw attention. But suspicions grew when a villager, Mr. X, reported that around 1 a.m. on February 12th, he saw a woman leaving on a motorcycle. Her build and clothing looked exactly like Wang Qia's. Though he doubted himself he'd been drinking and knew she couldn't ride, his account matched too many details. Police checked her home and confirmed her father's motorcycle matched the description. When they questioned her parents, their nervous avoidance only deepened suspicion. Finally, they confronted Wang Qia herself. To their shock, she confessed instantly, but it wasn't the confession that left officers speechless. It was her motive. Wang Qia described years of torment at the hands of her in-laws after giving birth. She was forced back to work just 3 days later, starved, of proper food. Unable to breastfeed her child when she begged to borrow milk, her mother-in-law Lecky slapped her and accused her of being a disgrace. The baby often survived on nothing more than rice water. Her suffering only worsened. Her in-laws took the money she saved for her daughter's future and used it for her sister-in-law's wedding. At home, she was treated as little more than a servant, first to wake, last to sleep, laboring in the fields by day and working endlessly at night. But the worst came from her father-in-law, Xiao Mian. One summer afternoon, while alone at home, he cornered her in the bathroom and assaulted her, claiming that if his son couldn't enjoy her, he would, from then on. He preyed on her whenever he pleased. Then when caught in the act by Lecky and her daughter Xiao Qingqing, they did nothing. Instead, they accused Wang Qia of seducing him. Lecky poured boiling water on her, left her scarred, even hammered nails into her shoes. Still, Wang Qia endured for the sake of her daughter. But everything shattered on Lunar New Year's Eve in 1998, when she returned home from shopping. She heard her daughter screaming. She rushed in to find her father-in-law on top of the child, clothes torn, her daughter begging him to stop. Enraged, Wang Qia shoved him away, but drunk, he lunged back. Lecky stormed in not to protect the child, but to slap Wang Qia and order her to apologize to her abuser. Xiao Qingqing even restrained her husband, Ling Shisha, preventing him from helping. Faced with such cruelty, seeing her daughter weeping and broken, Wang Qia realized there would be no justice under this roof that night. In the freezing cold, she carried her daughter 20 kilometers back to her parents' house. But the story didn't end there. Qia and her daughter eventually returned. Since her little girl was about to start school and needed the proper paperwork, Wang Qia reluctantly went back. But just a month later, history repeated itself. This time, she had reached her breaking point. She swore the Xiao family would pay for everything she had endured over the past years. From February 2nd, Wang Qia began preparing for revenge. Each day she secretly bought small amounts of gasoline, storing it in a hidden container inside the kitchen, confident no one would ever notice. Since her in-laws rarely cleaned during this time, she even learned to ride a motorcycle, which she later used as part of her alibi. By February 10th, she deliberately picked fights with her mother-in-law, forcing herself to be sent back to her parents' house. This allowed her to take her daughter with her and strengthen her alibi. On February 11th, she returned to her in-laws' home, familiar with the layout. Sneaking inside was easy, knowing the family drank ginger tea every night. She laced both the tea and sugar jars with sleeping pills, but her plan was discovered. Ling Xia caught her in the kitchen. Instead of hiding the truth, Wang Qia openly told him she planned to set the house on fire the next evening. She even advised him to take his son and leave before it was too late. On the following night, Wang Qia carried out her plan, believing Ling Xia had escaped. She ignited the fire. What she didn't know was that he had chosen to stay, whether out of loyalty, despair, or defiance. Ling Xia drank the drugged tea with his wife and child, and perished with them in the flames. When questioned by police, Wang Qia showed little remorse. She did not regret the crime itself, only that she had failed to give her daughter a happy life before her execution. She asked her parents to raise the girl, and gave her daughter one final piece of advice: never live a life like mine. Her final words left many people shaken. Everyone wishes to be a good example for their children. But what kind of suffering had this woman endured for her last wish to be a plea that her daughter never repeat? Her path? Story 3. In early 2013, a shocking murder case in Taiwan's Bali district captured nationwide attention. The brutality of the crime was disturbing enough, but the victim's identity, a wealthy patriarch of a well-known family, made it even more sensational. On February 26, 2013, a woman named Mo Yun was walking along the Tamsui River when she noticed a large object lying near the edge of the mangrove forest. Her eyesight was poor, but as she moved closer, the sight made her collapse in terror. It was a human body. Her screams drew a nearby man, who quickly called the police. Within minutes, officers arrived and secured the area. To their shock, the body was identified as Mr. Chin Jinfu, who had been reported missing just days earlier, despite swelling from the water. His features were still recognizable. His body showed injuries, particularly on his neck and torso, but it was unclear whether they were caused by a weapon, rocks beneath the river, or mangrove roots. As the tide carried him, the decomposition further complicated matters curiously. Chen's clothes were neat, his shoes intact, and he still wore a gold-plated watch, signs that this was unlikely a robbery at first glance. It looked like a tragic accident, a man slipping into the river, but then the story grew darker while police searched the area. Chen's family arrived and asked about his missing wife, Mrs. Chen Kaping, who had also vanished on the evening of February 16, thrust as investigators tried to piece things together. A new lead surfaced. A local witness recalled seeing two individuals burning paper money by the river on the night of February 25th, just a day before Chen's body was discovered in Taiwan. Burning offerings for the dead is common, so the witness thought little of it at the time, but now it raised chilling questions. Unfortunately, the mangrove area had no surveillance cameras, and nearby residential cameras did not cover that direction. For the moment, those two mysterious figures remained unidentified. Despite setbacks, the police remained determined. They questioned local residents, asking if anyone had noticed suspicious activity on the night of the murder, alongside investigating the death of Chen Jinfu. Authorities were also under heavy pressure to find his wife Jiang, Gaiping. Until this point, no one knew if she was alive or dead. To move forward, investigators split into two teams. One focused on tracking down Jiang, Gaiping, while the other pursued leads on Chen's case. Then, the next day, a crucial development came in. A woman had attempted to withdraw money from Jiang's bank account at a branch in Zhang County. She failed at the ATM after entering the wrong password, then boldly went to the counter, but the bank staff, noticing her much younger appearance compared to the profile on record, refused the transaction. This incident split the investigation team. Some suspected Jiang herself was behind everything, perhaps orchestrating her husband's death and sending someone disguised as her to collect money. Others believed both Chen and Jiang had been targeted by killers motivated purely by greed. The second theory gained far more support, especially from the victims' relatives. So why did most people side with the financial motive? To answer that, let's take a step back and look at the couple's background. Chen Jinfu, born in 1934, was a wealthy businessman. He once taught at Takashoku University in Japan, owned two uninhabited islands in Okinawa, and held properties worth tens of millions of Taiwanese dollars. His wife, Jiang Gaiping, born in 1956, was an associate professor at Chinan University. She also possessed jewelry valued at 40 million Taiwanese dollars, about $12 million USD. The couple lived in a luxury villa in Bali District, New Taipei City. Though childless, they were surrounded by attentive relatives, nieces, and nephews. Their lifestyle was peaceful. They traveled, visited local coffee shops, and attended social events. In short, there was no logical reason for Zheng to harm her husbands. Since February 27th, the day the mysterious woman attempted to withdraw funds, the police had scoured surveillance cameras around the area, but found no useful leads. However, progress came from another direction. A distant relative of Chen revealed that after amassing his fortune, Chen had retired, sold his properties in Japan, and settled in Bali District with his wife, preferring a quiet life by the Tamsui River. Coincidentally, this was the same area where both victims' bodies would later be found. The relative also mentioned something striking. The couple often visited the only nearby cafe, Momo Coffee, and had even adopted a young woman who worked there. With this revelation, investigators rushed to the Cafe Momo Coffee, located just 130 meters from where Chen's body was discovered. Was managed by a woman named Zhan. Born in 1985, Zhan confirmed Chen had been a regular customer since 2009, often accompanied by his wife. She herself was the adopted daughter's Anne explained that she first met the couple in 2009 while working at the cafe during casual conversations. They learned she was struggling financially. Her father had died young. Her sister studied abroad, and her mother worked alone in Cambodia out of sympathy. Chen offered to adopt her as their daughter starting in 2010. He gave her financial support, expensive jewelry, and even guided her in stock investments. She was deeply grateful. Last time the couple visited the cafe was February 16th, when days passed without seeing them. Zan assumed they were traveling busy preparing for her wedding. She didn't check in when asked about Chen's social circle. She said few others were close to the couple, aside from Lu Binghang, the cafe's owner, and 2 shareholders, Oi Ching and Ding. But Lu's relationship with Chen appeared closest. Summoned for questioning, Lu surprisingly told police, "If you want real information, ask Zan. She knew them best." This hinted at tension, perhaps even jealousy, between staff members. Investigators interviewed every employee, but gained nothing useful. Then an officer outside noticed a surveillance camera pointing at the cafe entrance. They quickly obtained the footage. The recordings from February 16th confirmed Chen and Zheng had indeed visited Momo Coffee, but there was a chilling footage showed them leaving when police pressed employees present that day, including Zan's fiancé Yang. Answers were evasive. Some claimed they left early. Others insisted they were too busy to notice when the couple departed. Suspicion deepened rather than make arrests. Authorities quietly placed the cafe employees under surveillance. Yet one thing they hadn't considered: the media's relentless curiosity. Reporters swarmed the suspects, constantly pressing them for information, threatening to expose details investigators had hoped to keep hidden. But the biggest mystery still loomed. Where was Zhang Guiping? Was she alive? Or had she suffered the same fate as her husband? On March 2nd, the truth surfaced as the search team combed the banks of the Tamsui River. One officer pushed through the swampy mangrove edge near a bike path. There, in the mud, they discovered a woman's body even before forensic confirmation. Everyone knew the long search was over. The body belonged to Zhang Guiping. That same day, police received a report from Shuren University. A female student had discovered John Jing's wallet inside the women's restroom. It became clear that the perpetrator's attempt to mislead investigators had failed at this stage. The focus of suspicion remained on the people connected to Momo Coffee. In total, there were 11 individuals under scrutiny: 6 store employees, Yihan's fiancé, the shop owner, and 2 shareholders. On March 3rd, police searched the cafe and discovered 3 drops of blood in the kitchen. This discovery raised alarms, especially since autopsy results later revealed that the victims had not drowned, but had been murdered. On March 4th, forensic experts confirmed the chilling details. Both victims had been drugged with anesthetics before being stabbed and thrown into the river Jian. Jiaoying suffered multiple 6-centimeter deep stab wounds, including one to the lung, and gaping injuries to her neck. These wounds proved fatal and contradicted earlier theories that the couple had died by accident in the water. Despite these breakthroughs, the killer's identity remained hidden. The only certainty was that the culprit was among the 11 tied to Momo Coffee. To avoid being misled, detectives began re-examining each suspect's background and recent activities. The adopted daughter of the victims had been financially supported by the Chin couple for years. With her wedding approaching and her calm, detailed cooperation during questioning, police found it hard to believe she had any motive to harm her foster parents. Then shifted to the owner, Lu Binghang, and the 2 shareholders, Shi Chung and Zheng Ganan. Investigators uncovered financial tensions. Lu had asked Mr. Chin for a large loan, which was initially refused. Still, all 3 claimed solid alibis. The remaining cafe employees provided little information of value, and without firm evidence, police released them under surveillance. Meanwhile, the case attracted growing media attention. Reporters began crowding the cafe, asking probing questions that only added pressure to the investigation. By early March, a timeline of events had taken shape. February 16th, Mr. and Mrs. Chin were last seen at Mo Coffee February 20th. Their family reported them missing February 25th. Witnesses saw two people burning joss paper near the river February 26th. Mr. Chin's body was found February 27th. A woman impersonating Mrs. Chin attempted to withdraw money from her account. March 2nd, Mrs. Chin's body was recovered. Her wallet was later found at Shirun University March 3rd. Blood was discovered inside. Momo Coffee March 4th. Autopsies confirmed they had been stabbed, drugged, and dumped in the river still. Without a confession or direct evidence, the case remained unsolved. But on March 6th, a breakthrough came. A journalist spotted two cafe employees, Oh Shering and Zhang Yening, cleaning the store's storage room in the middle of the night. Their explanation, just clearing out trash, seemed suspicious. Hours later, a bank employee came forward, claiming the woman who had tried to impersonate Mrs. Chin looked exactly like one of the cafe's staff members when shown photos. She immediately identified her. It was none other than Sihan Paulus. Now believed Sihan had committed the crime, aided by Oh Shering and Zhang Yening, who may have been helping cover it up that afternoon. Officers stormed Momo Coffee and placed Sihan under arrest, but despite the mounting evidence, she remained calm, insisting she was innocent and that she owed everything to Mr. Chin and his wife, as police pressed her with the gruesome autopsy photos. Her silence was tested, but she continued to deny any involvement. One of the photos shattered Sihan's composure. She vomited, cried, and repeatedly apologized, whispering, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." After regaining control, she confessed. Suhan revealed that Mr. Chin often visited her coffee shop and had even intended to adopt her around the same time. Lu Binghang was struggling financially, knowing the Chin family's wealth. He conspired with two shareholders, Oering and Zhang Yening, to commit the crime. Sihan admitted she joined their plan in exchange for a large payout. She explained that she lured the couple to the cafe on February 16th. Once there, she spiked their drinks as Mrs. Chin began losing consciousness. Sihan forced her into a car, demanding her bank card PIN. When Mrs. Chin resisted, Sihan killed her, Lu Binghang and the others, then transported the bodies to a rented house. After the family reported the couple missing and police launched a search, the conspirators decided to dump the bodies along a riverbank near the coffee shop, one on February 26th, and the other on March to Anden on March 7th. Just as Lu Bing finished auditing the shop's books, he was blinded by flashing lights. Reporters surrounded him, shouting, "Why did you kill Mr. and Mrs. Chin?" Within minutes, police arrested him at the station. Binghang was stunned to find his shareholders already in custody. Police accused them of collusion, warning them against conspiring their stories. Meanwhile, Sihan refused to meet Binghang's eyes during questioning the next day. Newspapers exploded with headlines, "Coffee shop owners behind double murder." Sihan's testimony portrayed the three men as masterminds. Driven by greed, she admitted to murder, but insisted she was merely their pawn. Witnesses even recalled seeing her burn joss paper by the river, supposedly to honor the dead aunt. That Lu Binghang was with her. The media frenzy grew. With no physical evidence, no weapons, no bloody clothes, no surveillance footage, everything hinged on Sihan's story. Then, shockingly, she retracted her confession, claiming police had forced her statements. The three men were released on bail, but public opinion had already condemned them. Online, Binghang's attempts to defend himself only drew thousands of insults. Determined to prove his innocence, he dug into the cafe's surveillance himself. The footage showed Sihan meeting with the victims that night in her desk. He also found jewelry belonging to Mrs. Chin. April 2nd, Binghang turned this evidence over to police at last. The three men were cleared. Sihan, however, was charged with 5 major crimes: murder, robbery, theft, fraud, and perjury. But even then, she twisted her story first. She claimed Mr. Chin had offered her 6 million Taiwanese dollars and a house to kill his wife. Then, She insisted they had a secret romance and that he'd begged her to help eliminate his wife later. She said she only planned to rob Mrs. Chin but was incited by Mr. Chin to kill Finley. She claimed she wanted to escape Mr. Chin's harassment and marry her boyfriend, so she pretended to go along with him but secretly plotted to kill both. Husband and wife. She gave elaborate details about late-night meetings, red envelopes filled with cash, and expensive gifts of jade and pearls. Yet prosecutors found no proof of an affair after months of lies, shifting stories, and denials. Sion finally admitted the truth. She alone had committed the crime. Obsession with wealth soon spiraled into something far darker. Her target was the Chin couple, who were known to keep jewelry worth nearly 40 million Taiwanese dollars in a safe deposit box at the new Taipei City Farmers Association to study how the system worked. Sion even rented her own box, just to see what the keys looked like, but she needed access to the couple's key in early 2013. She grew closer to them, attending yoga classes and adjusting her schedule to avoid suspicion. During one visit, she secretly slipped sleeping pills into Mr. Chin's drink, hoping to search for the key while he slept, but the plan failed. She left empty-handed soon. Her determination hardened. On February 16th, she invited the Chins to a coffee shop under the pretense of celebrating a child's birthday. When they arrived, they were told the party was scheduled for the following week. To apologize, she offered them drinks laced with more sleeping pills. Within an hour, Mrs. Chin began to feel dizzy. Later, Mr. Chin too seemed drunk and unsteady. Instead of escorting them home, as she pretended, Sion led them out the back door away from security cameras and into the mangrove forest near the Sui River, where the tide was rising. Her twisted plan was to let the waters claim them, making it appear like a tragic accident, but fate disrupted her scheme. Mr. Chin regained consciousness and weakly questioned her. Realizing her plan was exposed, Sion panicked. She pulled out a fruit knife and repeatedly stabbed him, covering his mouth to silence his cries. Then she turned on Mrs. Chin, stabbing her in the neck and chest until she too was lifeless. Dragging both bodies to the river, she let the tide submerge them before fleeing the following day. Disguised in a wig and Mrs. Chin's clothes, she brazenly attempted to withdraw money from the couple's bank account, managing to steal over 10 million Taiwanese dollars. Witnesses, however, soon pieced together her lies. The yoga instructor, taxi driver, and bank clerk all confirmed details of her movements. When arrested in March 2013, Sion changed her story multiple times, first blaming others, then claiming a love affair with Mr. Chin, and later insisting she acted alone, but investigators found no truth in her claims. By October, the court sentenced her to death for robbery and double murder. Calm. At first, she broke down only when hearing the word death, crying that she hadn't expected such punishment. Her case became one of Taiwan's most chilling examples of greed and deception, though rumors about possible accomplices lingered. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and yet, stories like this raise a haunting question. People are not born evil. Sometimes it is ego, desperation, or a single reckless choice that leads someone down a path of no return. The housekeeper hurried to open the door. Once inside, Mrs. Chung rushed straight to the fourth floor. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, only to find her son lying motionless on the bed, covered in blood. Overcome with fear, Mrs. Chung screamed and collapsed from a heart attack. Hearing the commotion, the young maid Wang ran upstairs. The horrific sight left her trembling, but she managed to call the police and an ambulance. While helping Mrs. Chung, authorities quickly arrived, reassured Wang, and gathered the details from her testimony. They learned a brutal murder had occurred at the residence of government official Zhu Zong. Recognizing the gravity of the case, a 5-member investigation team was dispatched. By the time they arrived, medical staff had already rushed Mrs. Chung, Zong's mother, to the hospital. The crime scene was secured, 2 bedrooms on the 4th floor of the villa. Inside, the investigators were shaken. Both Mr. and Mrs. Zong were found dead. Zong had 2 deep stab wounds, one in his neck Another in his abdomen. His head remained on the pillow, suggesting he had been killed in his sleep. Never given a chance to resist, the wounds indicated a weapon like a dagger or folding knife with a blade. Around 20 centimeters long, his wife, Ling Shan, lay dead in a corner. She had been struck violently on the head and chest, likely with a hammer, and her face bore the worst of the injuries. Her neck also showed strangulation marks, but the cause of death was determined to be severe trauma and blood loss, hinting she may have been tortured before being killed. The evidence suggested Mr. Zong was attacked first, while Ling Shan awoke and tried to escape, but was subdued and murdered in another bedroom. The couple's children, 14-year-old daughter Zhu and 15-year-old son Su Zhongjin, were also found dead. Each had fatal chest wounds. Their beds showed no signs of struggle, indicating they were killed swiftly, possibly before realizing what was happening. Different weapons were used on the children, raising two chilling possibilities. Either the killer struck both simultaneously to silence them quickly, or there were two assailants, each targeting one child. The latter theory gained strength, especially since both sharp and blunt weapons had been used on Ling Shan's villa itself, showed no forced entry. Valuables including cash, jewelry, and even the safe remained untouched, ruling out robbery. Instead, the brutality pointed toward revenge. Whoever committed the murders was either someone trusted enough to be let inside or someone with a key, with no fingerprints, no surveillance, and few leads. The investigation hit a wall. Police offered a $50,000 reward for information, hoping the public could help. Zhu Zong, 44, was director of a local tax bureau branch in Hezhou City, Guangxi Province. Known as gentle and modest, his income was limited, with most of the family's wealth coming from his wife's real estate and cement businesses. Their children were well-behaved students, admired by teachers and classmates. As investigators worked tirelessly, rumors spread through the city. Some claimed Zong had embezzled funds, sparking deadly retribution. Others believed he'd made enemies through his work, but inquiries showed Zong had little power, no record of corruption, and no serious grudges. The spotlight then shifted to the only survivor, housekeeper, little Wang. Interrogated intensely, she wept throughout. It was later revealed she was not only a maid, but also Zhu Zong's cousin. Wang had been supported by the family for many years. Due to her disability and lack of a husband, she lived rent-free, earned a salary, and was described by neighbors as kind, honest, and polite. Given her limited mobility, police quickly ruled her out as a suspect, believing she lacked both motive and capability to commit such a brutal crime. Investigators then shifted focus to Ling Shan's social relationships through her sister, Ling Zhoa. It was revealed that Shan's husband, Zhu Zong, was unfaithful, secretly meeting his ex-girlfriend. The betrayal weighed so heavily on Shan that she had once considered ending her life. Tensions escalated further when Zong clashed with the ex-girlfriend's husband. Jiangsu Jin. Shan's own past was also complicated. She had divorced her first husband, Sagung, after a failed marriage, but still kept in touch with him recently. Sagung urged her to leave Zong and return to him, with both Shan and Zong engaged in extramarital affairs. Their household was plagued with constant arguments, as confirmed by housekeeper Wang. With this, police identified two main suspects: Shan's ex-husband, Sagung, and Jiangsu Jin, the husband of Zong's ex-girlfriend. Separate teams pursued both leads when officers questioned Sagung. He appeared shocked, but suspiciously mentioned details of the massacre before investigators told him about it. Pressed further, he admitted lying to avoid trouble, but later provided dashcam footage, confirming his alibi. Meanwhile, the team investigating Su Jin learned that he and his wife had abruptly left for Yunnan early on May 2nd, just hours after the murder. Suspicion rose, especially after neighbors described him as a gambler with a troubled marriage. Some had even seen Zong and Su Jin's wife acting intimately in public. But this lead also collapsed when hospital records confirmed that Su Jin and his wife were caring for his sick mother that night. With both suspects cleared, the case stalled again. Further inquiries into the family's financial records and employees yielded no solid leads. Fear gripped the city, as residents worried about the possibility of another attack. Under immense pressure, authorities raised the reward for information from 50,000 yuan to 200,000 yuan. Yet the daily flood of tips led nowhere. Finally, during a re-examination of the villa, investigators discovered something crucial: a sock print in the dust on the 6th floor and a slipper print near the crime scene on the 4th. Analysis showed the sock print belonged to a man about 165 meters tall, while the slipper print, partially preserved, belonged to a woman under 16 meters tall. The missing slipper, size 37, was identified as one that Wang had left by the door. From this, police concluded there were at least two perpetrators, one male and one female, who had access to the house. Keith Zhu family's murder shocked investigators. The killers had been familiar with the victims, sneaking into the home late at night and carefully wiping away fingerprints from railings and door handles to cover their tracks. The question quickly arose: how did they get inside? The 7-story building had several empty floors. The Zhu family lived on the 4th floor, while their housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, stayed upstairs to enter the bedrooms. The intruders needed keys, yet after the crime, all 5 original sets of family keys were recovered. This meant the killers had used a duplicate. Detectives turned their focus to relatives and close friends who might have had access 10 days later. Mrs. Chen recalled something crucial. She had once given her daughter Ling Shaowa the keys when staying at her house, and Shaowa had held on to them for several days. That gave her the perfect opportunity to duplicate them. With suspicion growing, police dug deeper. Shaowa fit the description of the female suspect, and phone records revealed she had made several calls the night of the murder, both to her sister and to a young man named Lu Xingming. Investigators soon discovered Ming was linked to Shaowa's niece, and he matched the male suspect's description, adding to the suspicion. Witnesses reported seeing Shaowa's brother, Su Jiangazili, recognized by his lintner. The family home that same night closed in. The suspects fled from city to city, evading capture, but on May 18, 2011, police finally arrested Ling Shaowa, her brother Su Jiang, her accomplice Su Jia, and her boyfriend Lu Xingming at a hotel in Guangdong province under interrogation. The truth unraveled. Su Jia broke down first, admitting that Shaowa had arranged for duplicates of the house keys a year earlier, plotting her sister's murder long in advance. When cornered, Shaowa finally confessed her motive: years of jealousy, resentment, and bitterness born into a poor farming family. Shaowa had once lived comfortably through marriage, sending money to her parents and enjoying respect within her family. But when her own marriage collapsed and her sister, Shan, remarried a wealthy tax official, their fortunes reversed. Shan built a thriving business, a lavish home, and earned admiration from the entire family, while Shaowa was left with little. What made it worse was that Shan had borrowed over 400,000 yuan, about $55 from Shaowa, to build her business, but refused to share any of her profits later on. Each time Shaowa asked for help, she was dismissed coldly. The breaking point came on May 1st, when Shan snapped over the phone: "Why don't you think of your own way to make money? Stop begging. I've already given you enough. You won't get another penny." Those words, sharp as knives, ignited Shaowa's fury. What began as envy had grown into pure hatred, and that night, she set her plan into motion to wipe out her sister's entire family. The investigation gains momentum. The murders of the Wu family had shocked the entire city of Jinjiang. Forensic doctors' estimates of the victims' times of death raised chilling questions. Why had the killer chosen to remain inside the house for over 2 hours after the first murder? And why did he systematically eliminate each family member rather than fleeing after securing valuables? Police knew they were not dealing with a simple robbery gone wrong. This was something far more personal, an act of hatred, vengeance, or betrayal. The crime scene was located in the Henan Group's staff dormitory, a place reserved for the company's senior management. Neighbors lived in close proximity, Yet none had heard screams or disturbances. Some recalled faint noises, but nothing alarming enough to draw attention. This meant the killer had acted with both efficiency and calculation. The missing items from the house. 3 mobile phones were confirmed missing, along with a handful of personal items yet. Large sums of money and expensive jewelry had been untouched. The robbery theory weakened with each passing hour. Why would a burglar carefully tie up each victim, suffocate some, stab another, and stay inside for such a prolonged time only to take a few mobile phones and leave behind far greater valuables? Investigators began focusing on a different angle. The possibility of a grudge neighbor's testimonies when police canvassed neighbors. Several recalled seeing strangers loitering near the building days before the murders. One neighbor, an elderly woman, reported seeing a man in his 30s who appeared nervous, pacing around the entrance. Another neighbor remembered hearing faint thuds around 10 a.m. on the day of the murders, but assumed it was household noise. The timing aligned disturbingly well with the forensic doctor's timeline. Forensic discoveries. Forensic team uncovered more crucial details. The ropes used to tie the victims were traced to a local market, commonly used in shipping or packaging. The duct tape used on the daughters' mouths was a rare brand, sold in only a few stores. In the city, fingerprints were smudged, suggesting the killer had tried wiping them away, but a partial print remained on one of the ropes. These small clues gave investigators the first real trail to pursue motives beyond money. The task force began interviewing people connected to the Henin group. As vice president, Uyagi had made both allies and enemies in the corporate world. Some colleagues hinted at his strict management style, which may have created resentment among employees or business rivals. Others mentioned personal disputes. Rumors circulated about disagreements over land deals, financial contracts, and internal promotions. Could one of these conflicts have escalated into murder? Meanwhile, police turned their attention toward family matters. The Wu family had suffered a tragedy earlier that year, the death of Wu's only son in a car accident. This had not only devastated the family emotionally, but also disrupted the company's succession plans. Some insiders whispered that disputes over inheritance and corporate power might have fueled resentment. The daughter-in-laws escaped. The only surviving family member, Yin Minen, the daughter-in-law, had narrowly escaped death because she was away on an errand married to the late son. She had been part of the family for 3 years. Naturally, investigators questioned her closely. Did she know of any enemies? Did she suspect anyone in the company or extended family? While her grief appeared genuine, police could not ignore the possibility of her involvement. After all, she stood to gain from her husband's inheritance and might have had knowledge of the family's daily routines. Her alibi, however, was verified. She had been at her parents' home, confirmed by multiple witnesses. For now, she was ruled out as a suspect. The psychological profile criminal profilers brought in by the task force analyzed the killer's methods. Their conclusions painted a chilling picture. The murders were not impulsive. The killer had brought ropes, duct tape, and weapons in advance. The order of the killings suggested control and intimidation. By killing the mother first, the killer eliminated the family's strongest female presence. By suffocating the daughters, he demonstrated a methodical, cruel detachment. The father's stabbing was likely personal, driven by anger or revenge. The prolonged stay in the house indicated that the killer was not afraid of being discovered, suggesting familiarity with the neighborhood, or even confidence that he would not be interrupted. The profile pointed toward someone who knew the family, bore resentment, and had carefully planned the murders. A province-wide manhunt. By late August 1999, the case had escalated into one of the largest investigations in Fujian province's history. Police issued province-wide notices, circulated the partial fingerprint to national databases, and traced the missing mobile phones within days. Investigators received their first break. One of the missing phones had been switched on briefly in a neighboring city. The signal was traced to a public payphone, but the suspect had vanished before authorities arrived. Still, this confirmed that The killer was trying to use or sell the stolen phones and error. That could eventually lead to capture while the neighbors were having lunch. No one on the 5th floor heard any commotion coming from the Woe family's apartment. Coincidentally, the chairman of the Hennen group, who lived just 1 floor below, was out with his family that day. The 6th floor was under renovation and completely empty. This meant that the killer had struck at the perfect time, when no one was around to hear or witness anything. Police investigators quickly noticed 2 troubling details. First, the Woe family lived inside the Hennen group's private residential area. The main entrance to their apartment showed no signs of forced entry. This strongly suggested that the killer was someone the family trusted, someone they willingly let inside. Second, detectives speculated whether the motive might be financial. Suspicion soon turned toward the daughter-in-law, Yang Maimin. On paper, she had a lot to gain. If only Wojia had died, she wouldn't inherit the entire estate, but if the whole family was wiped out, the massive fortune would legally pass to her. With this theory in mind, police dug into Yang Maimin's movements. Their findings, however, painted a different picture. She had gone to her parents' home the night before the murders. On the day of the crime, she stayed at her office, never leaving for more than 15 minutes at a time. Given the distance from her workplace to the family residence, it was practically impossible for her to have committed the killings. Another police team turned its attention toward the Hennen Group employees. By all accounts, the Woe family had been kind, generous, and well-liked. With no record of disputes or conflicts, investigators then discovered something interesting. On the day of the murders, Jia's 2 daughters had returned home earlier than usual because their father was busy at work. This change in routine would later become an important detail. The breakthrough came when the company's executive director provided a new lead. Jia had been secretly meeting a woman at the Amping Hotel. Police identified her as Tang Min, a businesswoman from Jingmen City in Hubei province. Years earlier, she had business dealings with the Hennen group. Recently, however, she had resurfaced in Xiamen under unclear circumstances and had been staying at the Amping Hotel in the days leading up to the murders. But on the very day of the crime, Temps Min suddenly disappeared. Authorities tracked her down and brought her in for questioning. When police told her about the Woe family's murder, she appeared genuinely shocked. Temps Min explained that Wojia had been her longtime benefactor and mentor. She had recently traveled to Xiamen to seek his help in starting a beauty salon. According to her, she had met him on the 8th and checked out of the hotel on the morning of the 9th. They were supposed to meet at a coffee shop later that afternoon, but when she called him, he never answered. After reviewing her statements and timeline, the police found no evidence linking her to the murders and cleared her as a suspect in Midagast, 1999, with no progress. The police announced a public reward of 200,000 yuan, about $30,000 US dollars, for any credible leads. The announcement captured massive public attention, flooding investigators with tips. Just days later, a man rushed into the task force office with a chilling story. On the night of August 11th, he claimed to have overheard 3 villagers bragging about pulling off a big score in Xiamen. What made the tip suspicious was that these men, known for being idle and dirt poor, suddenly started flashing wealth. Acting on the lead, police searched the suspects' homes and discovered unexplained cash amounts eerily similar to what had been taken from the Woe residence. The suspects, identified as Chen, Lin, and Lian, were quickly rounded up, but as soon as police arrived, all 3 tried to escape. After a brief chase, they were caught even before questioning began. One of them blurted out, "I didn't do anything. It was the other 2 who dragged me into it." This immediate defensive reaction stunned detectives. They hadn't even mentioned the Woe family case yet. Why were they panicking if they were innocent? Under interrogation, the men denied knowing anyone named Wojia. They insisted they were not killers, but admitted to forming a gang that extorted money and occasionally stole vehicles from locals. On the day of the murders, August 9th, they claimed they had been busy extorting money from another Xiamen resident, an alibi that police later confirmed. While guilty of other crimes, The trio had no involvement in the Wu family massacre despite their efforts. The case, stalled weeks, turned into months, and Henin Group stock began to plummet due to the uncertainty surrounding the murder of its high-profile executive. To maintain stability, the company added another reward of $10,000 for new information then. On December 26, 1999, more than 4 months after the killings, Wu Jia's daughter-in-law, Yang Yanin, received a chilling phone call on the other end. A man from Xiamen calmly claimed he had been hired to kill the Wu family, and that the true mastermind was still out there. The mysterious phone calls began in late December 1999. A man contacted Yang Yanin, the victim's daughter-in-law, claiming he knew the truth behind the brutal killings. More disturbingly, he demanded $1,000, promising that if she paid, he would surrender himself and her to the police before Yang could even respond. The caller hung up, warning he would call back the next date first. Yang thought it was nothing more than another cruel hoax. For months, people had harassed the grieving family because of the large reward announced for information, but after a night of unease, she decided to inform the police. In December 27, 1999, the man called again. Investigators quickly traced the number to a public phone booth in Xiamen. 2 calls had been made from that booth within the time window. One to Yang, and shockingly, the other to Wu Ba Man, who had already been dead for years. Why would the killer call a deceased person? Was it a mistake, or was it proof the suspect knew the Wu family personally? The police soon identified the caller, Wu Hongfa, a childhood classmate of Wu Ba, and a man from the same village. His home was just 100 meters away from the Wu family residence, but Hongfa was nowhere to be found. His family claimed he had disappeared 3 months earlier, saying only that he was going out for business, though the suspect had vanished. Investigators recovered fingerprints from his home. The results were damning. They matched prints lifted directly from the crime scene. Digging deeper, detectives learned that Hongfa had been in frequent contact with a man named Wu Yong in Shenzhen. 2 separate teams mobilized, one to track Wu Yong, the other to map out Hongfa's social network. When they located Wu Yong, his behavior only raised suspicions. He denied knowing Hongfa, but admitted his sister was acquainted with him strangely. Wu Yong claimed she was out of town and asked the police to return later. His nervousness set off alarms under pressure. Wu Yong reluctantly allowed police to search his apartment in his sister's bedroom. Investigators found disturbed sheets, a warm mattress, and fresh food left on the table. Clear signs someone had just been there. Moments later, a frightened woman emerged from the closet. She admitted she was indeed in touch with Hongfa, though she insisted she hadn't seen him in person. Her phone, however, betrayed her. It contained dozens of recent text messages from him, sent from multiple numbers, all begging her for a place to hide. It was only a matter of time before the fugitive was cornered. On January 18, 2000, after weeks of pursuit, police finally captured Wu Hongfa in Shijiazhuang, born in 1971. Hongfa was the eldest of 4 children. He had dropped out of school at 15, spent 8 years working at his uncle's auto parts factory, and later married in 1993 with his father-in-law's help. He once ran a small workshop of his own, but his greed and vices destroyed everything. He drank heavily, gambled recklessly, abused his wife, and squandered his money in bars and nightclubs. Within a few years, he was bankrupt and bitter. By 1999, Hongfa was desperate. He remembered his old classmate, Wu Ba, and the Wu family's wealth. He planned to ask for money, but, if refused, he was ready to kill. On the morning of August 9, 1999, armed with tape and a knife, he disguised himself as a salesman and knocked on the Wu household's door. Jenny, the elderly matriarch, recognized him as a fellow villager and welcomed him in. Once inside, Hongfa asked for a loan. When she rejected him, he snapped. As she moved toward the window to call for help, Hongfa strangled her to death, staging the scene to look like a robbery. But things spiraled out of control when Jenny's 2 daughters, Wu Run and Wu Donghong, returned home unexpectedly. Hongfa ambushed them, tied them up, drew the curtains, and strangled both sisters. He now had 3 bodies on his hands, determined to at least profit from the bloodshed. Hongfa scoured the house for money, taking more than 6,000 yuan in cash, but just as he was preparing to leave, fate intervened. Wu Ji, the son, walked in through the front door startled. Hongfa hid behind the entrance and lunged at him with a knife, overpowered. Wu Ji was dragged into the bedroom and bound, still clinging to hope. Wu Ji recognized his attacker and pleaded for his life, promising him all the money he wanted, but Hongfa had already crossed a line of no return. He tried smothering Wu Ji with a quilt, but when the man resisted, he stabbed him 3 times in the neck, killing him instantly before fleeing. Hongfa stripped a gold necklace from the body, grabbed the stolen cash, and slashed the house's gas line in a final act of destruction. Then, with cold calculation, he slipped away into the village night, fearing that someone from the Wu family might have survived. Wu Hongfa fled the scene with the stolen cash. He drowned himself in gambling and nightlife, quickly squandering every cent. When he learned that the Hunan group had offered a $1 million reward for clues about the killer, greed clouded his mind. In a desperate bid, he contacted the Wu family's daughter-in-law Young Min, pretending he had information, never realizing that his deception would only expose him further during interrogations. Wu Hongfa admitted that in the months he spent hiding in his village, he was haunted by nightmares. He often dreamt of the Wu family standing silently at his bedside, or of police storming in to arrest him. Sleep only came when he stayed in crowded dormitories, or at acquaintances' homes, where he felt less vulnerably, because he acted alone and left very few traces. The investigation dragged on, but on December 20th, 2002, the Chuan Intermediate People's Court found Wu Hongfa guilty of intentional homicide and robbery. Sentencing him to death, he immediately appealed, claiming the first trial was unclear and that an execution risked wrongful conviction. After 9 more months of review, the Provincial High People's Court ruled that the evidence against him was overwhelming. All 4 victims were tied and gagged with identical methods. Matching Wu's confession, fingerprints from the ropes and tape at the scene matched his own. Victims had returned home at different times and were killed in 3 separate bedrooms, exactly as Wu had described in his statements for over 2 years. Wu never offered any credible evidence, pointing to other suspects with his confessions, supported by forensic proof. The court upheld his death sentence to solve this massacre. The special task force had traveled over 43,000 kilometers across 16 provinces and 36 counties, interviewing 10,000 people and chasing nearly 1,000 leads. It was an investigation of staggering scale, but beyond the brutality of the crime, the case gripped China because of who the victim was. Wu Ji, vice president of the Hunan group, born in 1948 to a poor farming family in Lingwu village, Fujian province. Wu Ji had worked tirelessly from youth, hauling fertilizer, clearing mountains, taking any job to support his siblings. In 1985, he co-founded the Hunan Industrial Company, later serving as its general manager through relentless travel and negotiation. He carved a path for the company nationwide. By 1998, Hunan Group was listed in Hong Kong with 8 thriving subsidiaries. Wu Ji himself held over 24 million shares, valued at more than 70 million Hong Kong dollars. Despite his wealth, he remained deeply rooted in his community, a talented architect. Many houses in Lingwu still bear his design. He and his family donated tens of millions of yuan to local projects, even establishing a 10 million yuan charity fund to his neighbors. Wu Ji wasn't just a businessman, he was a benefactor, a symbol of success who never forgot his origins. That's why his murder sent shockwaves far beyond Fujian. The tragedy was not just a family's loss, but a wound felt by an entire community, and a reminder of how greed can twist human nature into violence. Money can build lives, but it can also lure people into darkness. It is a possession we use in life, but it follows no one beyond death. As the rain falls softly and the night grows still, Thank you for keeping me company here on Crime Whisper. True crime stories remind us of life's fragility and the shadows we must remain watchful of, even as we search for comfort in the quiet. If tonight's story has kept you thinking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the night carry you to rest. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the darkness watch over you, terrified that someone from the Wu family might still be alive. Wu Honka quickly spent the stolen money on gambling and partying, but his greed soon overtook him again. When he learned that the Hanan group had offered a $1 million reward for information leading to the killer, he brazenly contacted the Wu family's daughter, pretending to have useful information. His goal wasn't justice, it was to trick them and claim the money, yet in his hiding, nightmares plagued him. Wu Honka often dreamed of the family he had slaughtered standing by his bed, staring silently. Other nights, he jolted awake, seeing visions of police officers breaking through his door, unable to bear the torment. He abandoned his home. He admitted later that he only felt safe in crowded places, sleeping in worker dormitories, crashing with acquaintances, always fearful that silence meant capture, because Wu Honka had acted alone and left few solid clues. The case dragged on for years, but finally, on December 20th, 2002, the Chenju Intermediate People's Court convicted him of intentional homicide and robbery, sentencing him to death. Wu Honka appealed, claiming the first trial's findings were unclear, and warning that execution could risk a wrongful conviction. For 9 more months, investigators and the court reviewed the evidence. The outcome was the same. The High People's Court ruled that the details of the murders were consistent with his confession. All 4 victims had been tied with the same method, their mouths sealed with tape, fingerprints taken from the ropes, and tape matched Wu Honka's own. The victims had returned home one by one and were found slain in 3 different bedrooms, exactly as he described in his statement. His repeated confessions aligned with forensic evidence, and during the years following his arrest, he never once produced credible proof that anyone else had been involved. Ultimately, the courts upheld the death sentence. Wu Honka's downfall was the result of sheer persistence by investigators. The special task force traveled more than 43,000 kilometers, spanning 16 provinces and 36 counties. They interviewed over 10,000 people, chasing nearly 1,000 leads before the truth finally emerged. But beyond the brutality of the crime itself, why did this massacre draw such enormous media attention? The answer lay in the victim. Wu Jia was no ordinary man. He was one of the founding members of the Hanan Group, one of China's rising corporate giants. Before his death, he owned over 24 million shares, valued at more than 70 million Hong Kong dollars. His roots were humble. Born in 1948 to a poor farming family in Linglu Village, Fujian Province, Wu grew up caring for his siblings, working in fields, hauling fertilizer, clearing mountains. Hardship forged his resilience. In 1985, he co-founded Henan Industrial Company, where he served as general manager to build the business. He crisscrossed the country, promoting products, breaking through barriers, securing markets. In 1998, his company went public in Hong Kong, eventually boasting 8 subsidiaries by then. Wu was not just a businessman but a respected figure in his hometown. He designed homes that still stand today, funded community projects, and together with his family donated tens of millions of yuan to charities. They even created a family charity fund with a 10 million yuan gift to the local federation. For a man of such stature to be murdered so savagely, slaughtered in his own home, shocked the nation. The media followed every turn of the investigation, adding immense pressure on the police. This tragedy is a reminder of the double-edged nature of wealth. Money can build legacies, but it can also attract greed, envy, and violence. As the story of Wu Jia shows, material fortune may be enjoyed in life, but it cannot be carried beyond death. And so, as the rain falls softly outside and the night deepens, we leave this tale behind. Thank you for joining me on Crime Whispered. True crime stories remind us of life's fragility the shadows that lurk within human desire, and the importance of vigilance, even in quiet moments. If you found tonight's story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the calm of the night guide you into rest. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over youth. Night air was heavy, thick with secrets no one dared whisper aloud in Hio City, Guangxi Province. A storm of rage and jealousy was quietly brewing, destined to erupt in the most devastating of ways. Ling Shaohua, petite and seemingly unremarkable, had spent her life in the shadows of her more successful sister, Ling Shouwen. While Shouwen thrived, building a thriving business empire and establishing a happy home, Shouwen's own life had been a series of disappointments, failed marriages, financial hardship, and the gnawing sense that the world had treated her unfairly over time. This simmering resentment hardened into a singular obsession. Revenge. Shouwen's plan was meticulous. She had cultivated a web of accomplices, including her boyfriend Lu Xingming and a trusted confidant, Suk Jiangsuya. Together, they plotted to strike at Shan's family, believing that the act would finally restore Shaohua's sense of power and entitlement. The motive was as chilling as it was simple: control of family inheritance, and the satisfaction of punishing the sister who had seemingly overshadowed Heron. The night of May 1st, 2011. The conspirators moved silently, using a duplicate key Shaohua had acquired months earlier. The trio entered the Zhang family villa, the 4th floor, home to Shouwen, her husband, Su Zhang, and their 2 children. Became a stage 4 horror. Swift, deliberate, and methodical. They began with the children. Su and Su Zhongin were attacked while asleep, their small bodies giving no resistance. Minutes later, the parents were struck down with ruthless efficiency. Ling Shouwen, confronted by her own sister, struggled and screamed, but duct tape and a carefully executed assault rendered her helpless. She was the last to die, her life extinguished amid the cold precision of Shaohua's vengeance. By morning, the villa was a scene of unimaginable carnage. Blood stained the once pristine sheets. Furniture bore marks of struggle, and the lingering presence of violence hung in the air. The housekeeper, little Wang, and Mrs. Chung, Su Zhang's mother, were spared by circumstance, the former due to her physical disability, the latter because she had been away at the hospital. Despite the trio's careful cleanup, traces remained: partial slipper prints, subtle smudges, and a trail of deceit that would eventually unravel the investigation. Painstaking and thorough, traced every lead. Police delved into family histories, financial disputes, and the twisted psychology of jealousy and betrayal. Ling Shaohua's resentment toward her sister, coupled with her manipulative use of accomplices, painted a portrait of cold-blooded calculation. After extensive interrogation and the discovery of key communications between Shaohua and her co-conspirators, the trio's guilt was undeniable. In January 2013, justice was delivered. Shaohua, Lu Xingming, and Suk Jiangsuya were executed, a grim resolution to a nightmare born of envy and greed. But as Hio City tried to recover from the horror, another tragedy was quietly unfolding hundreds of kilometers away, in Fujian Province. Here, the tale of the Wu family would grip the nation with equal horror. On August 9, 1999, Zillian, the sister of the household, sensed something was wrong. Multiple unanswered phone calls prompted her to rush to her sister's home in Anhai Town, Jinjiang City. What she found defied comprehension. The family's residence filled with the stench of gas, 2 young daughters, tied and suffocated, and their father and mother murdered with ruthless precision. The victims Wu Jia, vice president of the Henan Group, his wife Kujin, and their daughters Wan and Wu Donghong had been carefully targeted. No valuables were stolen, indicating that robbery was not the motive. The killer's actions were calculated, designed to leave the family defenseless while maintaining an appearance of order. Investigators noted the peculiar absence of disturbance in the living room, the methodical way the bedrooms were arranged post-mortem, and the careful use of bindings and tape to silence the victims. Suspicion initially fell on family members, particularly the daughter-in-law Yang Maimin, who would stand to inherit a vast fortune if the entire household perished, yet her alibi was solid, and further investigation revealed that the true perpetrator was someone who had known the family intimately with Honka, a man from the same village and a former classmate of the deceased son, had been driven by a mixture of envy, desperation, and greed. His life had been marked by failure and violence. Once a small business owner, he had lost everything and turned to alcohol, gambling, and petty crime. Viewing the affluent Wu family as a lifeline, he concocted a plan to extort money, fully prepared to kill if refused. On that fateful morning, he posed as a sales representative to gain entry when his requests for a loan were denied. His suppressed rage erupted into a calculated spree of violence. He killed Kujin first, then the daughters, and finally Wu Jia himself, leaving behind meticulous but incomplete traces of his presence. The investigation was grueling. Police tracked phone records, interviewed countless witnesses, and pieced together Wu Honka's movements across multiple provinces. His capture in Xizang on January 18, 2000, was the culmination of months of tireless detective work. His confession, corroborated by forensic evidence on bindings, witness accounts, and the careful timeline of events, left no doubt of his guilt. After 2 trials, the death sentence was upheld, bringing closure to a case that had spanned 3 years and involved over 10,000 interviews and 1,000 leads. Both stories, separated by time and geography, share a haunting symmetry: the destructive power of human emotion. Whether envy, resentment, or greed, Ling Showa sought revenge for perceived slights within her family, while Honka pursued wealth and recognition at the expense of lives he envied. In both cases, meticulous planning combined with intimate knowledge of the victims allowed the perpetrators to act with devastating effect, leaving investigators to unravel a labyrinth of lies, deceit, and violence. These tragedies also highlight the fragility of human morality: one sister's jealousy, one man's desperation, each capable of unleashing irreversible consequences. Families torn apart, communities shocked, and lives extinguished, all for motives that, in the end, seem almost incomprehensibly small compared to the enormity of their acts. Yet, the law, slow and exacting, eventually restored a measure of justice in Hayo City and Xinjiang. The courts affirmed the principle that premeditated violence, no matter the motive, carries the ultimate penalty. As night falls and the rain taps gently against the window pane, these stories linger in the mind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind ordinary faces. The Ling Shaowa case and the Wu family massacre serve not merely as tales of horror, but as cautionary narratives about the consequences of envy, greed, and unchecked emotion. They remind us that material wealth, familial bonds, and social standing, though often cherished, cannot shield us from the extremes of human cruelty. And so, the lessons remain: vigilance, awareness, and the understanding that the seeds of tragedy often grow in places least expected. Money, ambition, and jealousy may tempt some into paths of destruction, but the lives lost in these events echo far beyond the walls in which they occurred, haunting the collective memory of their communities, and reminding us that human actions, once set in motion, cannot be undone through the tireless efforts of investigators. Justice was eventually served, yet the stories of Ling Shaowa and Wu Honka endure, narrated across generations, retold in hushed tones, and preserved in the annals of true crime. Each case, though separated by hundreds of kilometers, converges on one stark truth: the human heart, capable of both love and vengeance, often walks the razor's edge between morality and depravity. The candlelight flickers, and the night grows long. These chronicles linger in the shadows of our consciousness, a testament to the necessity of caution, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Crime whisperers tell these tales not merely to frighten, but to remind us that life's fragility is real, and that human emotions, when left unchecked, can erupt into consequences more devastating than we might ever imagine. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, The streets of Hyo City and Jinjiang resumed their rhythms. Yet the stories of Lingshawa and Wahonka remain etched into the collective psyche, a haunting reflection of what can happen when envy and desperation replace reason and empathy. Each victim, each family destroyed, serves as a solemn reminder. The cost of human malice is always exact, and the shadows it casts can reach far beyond. The moment of the crime, the investigation revealed how meticulously Wahonka had planned the murders. He had studied the Wu family's routines, knew exactly when each member would arrive home, and carried the tools needed for the killings. Knife and binding tape. His actions were not spontaneous. They were premeditated. The careful staging of the scene, the closure of windows, and the absence of forced entries suggested he was not only familiar with the family, but calculated every move to avoid detection. Yet, despite his planning, small mistakes, missed fingerprints, overlooked phone records left a trail that the police would eventually follow. As detectives pieced together the timeline, they discovered that Wahonka had acted alone. Each step of his plan corresponded to the evidence at the scene. First Kujin, then the daughters, and finally Wujia. His attempt to justify the murders as a robbery was exposed when investigators found the minimal cash taken and the untouched valuables. Wahonka's confessions aligned perfectly with forensic findings, cementing his guilt beyond doubt. The court proceedings that followed were lengthy and intense. Wahonka initially appealed, arguing ambiguity in the evidence and attempting to deflect responsibility. Yet, the consistency of witness statements, forensic analysis, and his own detailed confession left the judges with no room for doubt. After months of trials, the Provincial High People's Court reaffirmed the death sentence. Justice, though delayed, was delivered days after the verdict. The case continued to captivate the public. The Wu family had been pillars of their community, and the sheer brutality of the murders shook both the town and the media. Reporters followed every development, while locals recounted the kindness, generosity, and achievements of the victims. It was not just a story of crime, it was a story of greed, envy, desperation, and the irreversible consequences of unchecked human impulses. In reflecting on these tragedies, one is reminded of the delicate balance between trust and vigilance. Lingshawa's envy and Wahonka's greed both erupted into violence, leaving families shattered and lives ended too soon. The cases underscore how wealth, resentment, and emotional turmoil can transform ordinary grievances into catastrophic outcomes, and how even the most calculated schemes cannot escape the inevitability of justice. The aftermath of the Wahonka case left an indelible mark on the community. Families became more cautious, neighbors more watchful, and the local authorities more diligent in monitoring unusual activities. Yet, the tragedy also served as a stark reminder of human vulnerability, how greed, jealousy, and desperation can turn even familiar faces into threats. The Wu family, once admired for their success and generosity, became symbols of both prosperity and the fragility of life. Their story resonated beyond the confines of the village, warning others that wealth and status cannot shield anyone from the consequences of human malice. For the investigators, the case was a testament to patience, perseverance, and the painstaking work required to bring a criminal to justice. Tracking Wahonka across multiple cities, analyzing forensic evidence, and interviewing thousands of people over months illustrated the dedication needed to solve a crime that initially seemed unsolvable. Each clue, no matter how small, played a critical role in unraveling the truth. It was a reminder that justice, while sometimes slow, ultimately relies on careful observation, methodical investigation, and unwavering commitment to the land. Yet, amid the horror and sorrow, there was also a lesson in the value of community and vigilance. The calls from vigilant neighbors, the timely actions of Yang Menon, and the relentless efforts of the police all contributed to bringing the perpetrator to justice. In a world where danger can lurk in the most familiar places, awareness, courage, and decisive action can prevent further tragedies. The story of the Wu family, like many true crime cases, leaves us with an uneasy awareness. Life is fragile, and even ordinary days can be turned into nightmares, but it also reminds us of resilience, justice, and the importance of standing against wrongdoing. In the quiet of the night, as the rain falls and the world sleeps, these tales echo a timeless truth: human actions, whether born of greed, envy, or malice, always carry consequences, and justice, though delayed, will eventually prevail as the shadows of the past linger. The stories of Lingshoa and Wahanka remind us that darkness can spring from the most familiar faces, and that betrayal, envy, and greed can twist even the bonds of family and friendship into instruments of horror. These tragedies are not just cautionary tales, they are mirrors, reflecting human vulnerabilities, showing how unchecked emotions and desires can lead to irreversible consequences for the families left behind. Grief and loss became permanent companions, their lives forever altered by the actions of those they once trusted, and for the communities affected, vigilance became a necessity, a silent pact to protect one another from the unpredictable dangers that lurk beyond the comfort of home. Every neighbor, every colleague, and every acquaintance now carried the weight of awareness, knowing that sometimes the threat is not a stranger, but someone who once shared laughter and familiarity. For law enforcement, the cases underscored the relentless nature of justice. Solving crimes of such complexity demanded patience, meticulous attention to detail, and unwavering determination. Each fingerprint, every call, record, and every seemingly minor observation became a vital piece of the puzzle. The efforts of investigators, from tracing elusive suspects to uncovering hidden motives, were a testament to the enduring power of diligence in the face of darkness. Yet, amid the terror and sorrow, there is also a lesson in resilience. Life continues, communities rebuild, and lessons are etched into the collective memory of those who witnessed these horrors. These stories compel us to reflect not only on the fragility of life and trust, but also on the importance of morality, empathy, and vigilance in the quiet hours. When the rain falls softly and shadows stretch long, the echoes of these crimes linger. As both warning and reflection, they remind us that while human nature can falter, justice, truth, and the courage to act can prevail, and in that fragile balance between darkness and light, we find the enduring message of vigilance, awareness, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Even as time moves forward, the shadows of these crimes leave lasting impressions on everyone involved: the families, the investigators, and the community. Lingshoa's calculated betrayal and Wahanka's cold-blooded violence both reveal how envy, desperation, and greed can fester quietly, only to explode in unimaginable ways. Each case serves as a chilling reminder that evil often hides behind familiarity, that the people we trust most can sometimes be the ones capable of the greatest harm. The survivors and the communities must grapple with the aftermath. Homes that were once safe become symbols of loss, and everyday routines are forever marked by vigilance and caution for law enforcement. These cases reinforce the importance of thorough investigation, patience, and attention to every small detail, from tracking phone calls to analyzing fingerprints. Every clue becomes a lifeline toward justice. Ultimately, these stories teach us about human nature, the fragility of trust, the destructive power of unchecked emotion, and the irreversible consequences of choices driven by greed or resentment. They are somber reminders that while justice may eventually prevail, the scars of betrayal and violence last far longer than the crimes themselves. And as the rain falls quietly at night, casting its soft rhythm over the streets and rooftops, these tales linger in our minds. They remind us to remain vigilant, to protect the ones we love, and to always be mindful of the shadows that can exist even in the brightest places. Crime may touch even the safest homes, but awareness, empathy, and justice are the tools that allow society to endure, rebuild, and remember. Even as the cases closed and justice was served, the echoes of those fateful nights never truly disappeared. Families were left to mourn, communities to heal, and investigators to carry the memory of every painstaking detail they uncovered each crime, whether driven by greed, jealousy, or rage, left a permanent mark on the lives it touched in. The quiet moments after the trials, the lessons of these tragedies became clearer. Trust must be measured, vigilance is necessary, and human emotion tempered by reason can lead to devastating consequences. Ling Shoa's envy and Wahanka's desperation were stark reminders that darkness can dwell in anyone, hidden behind familiarity or necessity for the law enforcement officers who pursued the truth. These cases were more than reports and evidence, they were reminders of their duty to protect, investigate, and ensure that even the most heinous crimes do not go unpunished. Every fingerprint, every call, every subtle clue mattered, reinforcing the idea that perseverance and attention to detail can uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried and for the world outside. These stories linger as cautionary tales, a mirror reflecting human desires, frailties, and the thin line between morality and crime. Money, power, and envy may tempt, but the cost of succumbing to them is permanent and unforgiving. So, as night falls, and the world grows quiet, let these stories remind us of vigilance, empathy, and justice. Let them remind us that, while darkness may appear, the light of truth and the pursuit of justice endure, carrying hope for those who survive, and honoring the memory of those lost. The aftermath of these brutal crimes also revealed the ripple effects on the surrounding communities. Neighbors, once trusting and close-knit, became wary of strangers and even familiar faces. In Ling Shoa's case, the entire family and household staff were left traumatized, struggling to comprehend that jealousy and greed could escalate to such extreme violence. Even those who had no direct involvement, like housekeepers and distant relatives, carried the weight of suspicion and fear. Investigators on both cases, Ling Shoa's and Wahanka's, faced immense pressure, not only to uncover the perpetrators, but also to manage public scrutiny. Media attention was relentless, and social fear amplified every detail for law enforcement. It was a test of endurance, patience, and methodical reasoning. Every clue, no matter how minor, phone records, key duplications, fingerprints, or witness accounts, had to be meticulously analyzed. One oversight could allow a murderer to escape or, worse, wrongly accuse an innocent person. In Ling Shoa's case, the meticulous premeditation of the crime stood in stark contrast to her emotional motives. While greed played a part in recruiting her accomplices, her driving force was envy and perceived betrayal. She manipulated trust, exploited familial ties, and weaponized the loyalty of others for her own ends. Meanwhile, Wahanka's actions were fueled by desperation and material obsession, a calculated combination of opportunity and unrestrained violence. Both cases highlighted that the pathway to violence is rarely a single factor. It is usually a convergence of personality flaws, environmental stressors, and immediate circumstances. The judicial system, upon reviewing these cases, ensured that every measure of evidence and testimony was carefully examined. Appeals were denied only after exhaustive verification, underscoring that justice, while deliberate, must also be precise. Death sentences, though severe, reflected both the premeditated nature of the crimes and the lasting impact on the victims' families and communities. Moreover, the psychological ramifications were profound. Ling Shoa's accomplices, initially tempted by greed, had to live with the moral weight of their actions during interrogation and trial. Wahanka, while alone, experienced persistent fear and hallucinations, haunted by the lives he had taken. Both situations underscore how crime never leaves the perpetrator untouched. The psychological consequences often mirror, if not exceed, the immediate societal damage. From a broader perspective, these cases serve as critical lessons in vigilance and human behavior. They demonstrate that familial trust can be manipulated, that desperation can override morality, and that even the most careful planning cannot hide the truth indefinitely. Law enforcement diligence, combined with forensic science, thorough interviews, and community cooperation ultimately ensures accountability. Even in the most complex scenarios, the stories of Ling Shaoa and Wahanka remain etched in public memory, not merely as tales of horror, but as sobering reminders. Human actions, when unchecked by empathy and reason, can lead to devastating consequences. The pursuit of justice requires patience, courage, and unyielding attention to detail. Qualities that both the officers and communities in these cases exemplified. Even as justice was carried out and sentences executed, the echoes of these crimes lingered in the minds of those affected. Survivors, neighbors, and investigators alike were left with the enduring truth that vigilance and moral integrity are vital shields against the darker inclinations of the human heart. The cases remind us that greed, jealousy, and revenge can destroy not only the immediate targets, but also the perpetrators themselves, leaving behind stories that educate, caution, and inspire deeper reflection on human behavior and societal responsibility beyond the immediate tragedies. Both the Ling Shaoa and Wahanka cases highlighted critical gaps in societal awareness and the warning signs that often precede violent acts. In Ling Shaoa's case, familial tension, jealousy, and perceived injustice simmered unnoticed for years, allowing her resentment to grow unchecked despite her family's support and financial assistance. Her perception of betrayal festered into a deadly obsession. The role of accomplices like Su Kang and Lu Xingming demonstrated how moral weakness and greed can amplify the reach of one individual's destructive intent. In Wahanka's case, desperation combined with a sense of entitlement led to calculated, cold-blooded violence. He leveraged personal connections and the victim's trust to gain access, illustrating how familiarity can be exploited to devastating effect. His subsequent behavior, attempting to claim the reward by feigning cooperation, exposed the lengths to which criminals may go to manipulate circumstances in their favor. For law enforcement, both cases reinforced the need for vigilance in monitoring patterns of relationships, financial disputes, and social networks as potential precursors to violent acts. The investigative process in both scenarios was painstaking. Detectives painstakingly traced phone records, verified alibis, and tracked movements across cities and provinces. Every detail mattered. The placement of a slipper, a key duplication, fingerprints on ropes and tape, the timing of phone calls, and witness recollections all formed pieces of an intricate puzzle. In Ling Shaoa's case, the discovery that she had secretly duplicated keys years before and coordinated with her accomplices exposed the extent of premeditation, underscoring how careful planning can prolong investigations. Wahanka's use of disguise and calculated entry demonstrated similar premeditation, though motivated primarily by financial desperation. These crimes underscored the destructive potential of unchecked emotions and desires. Ling Shaoa's envy and obsession with her sister's success drove her to extreme measures, revealing the dangers of long-harbored grudges and perceived familial injustices. Wahanka's desperation and sense of inadequacy, compounded by prior failures and an insatiable desire for wealth, transformed him from a struggling entrepreneur into a violent predator. Both cases illustrate how underlying emotional, financial, and social pressures can culminate in lethal outcomes when coupled with opportunity. The trials of the perpetrators were rigorous, emphasizing accountability and thorough evidence assessment. Courts examined motives, confessions, fingerprints, witness testimonies, and forensic details to ensure judgments were just and accurate. Ling Shaoa and her accomplices were denied appeals after psychiatric evaluations confirmed their mental fitness, affirming that personal responsibility, rather than insanity, drove the crime. Wahanka's appeals similarly failed, with the courts noting that the consistency of his confessions and the corroborating forensic evidence left no reasonable doubt regarding his guilt. Media coverage played a dual role in these cases. It both heightened public fear and reinforced the imperative of law enforcement transparency. Coverage of Ling Shaoa's familial betrayal and Wahanka's calculated murders captivated audiences, illustrating both the horror of the acts and the societal vulnerabilities they exploited. These narratives served as cautionary tales, reminding communities to remain vigilant and reflective, recognizing that threats can arise even within the most familiar spaces. The aftermath also highlighted the importance of support for affected families and communities. Survivors of both crimes faced lasting emotional scars, requiring psychological intervention and ongoing support. Investigators themselves experienced secondary trauma, a testament to the emotional toll of confronting extreme human violence. Both cases underscore that justice extends beyond sentencing, includes community recovery, acknowledgement of trauma, and societal education to prevent recurrence. Ultimately, these two cases converge on several lessons. Unchecked envy, greed, and desperation can escalate into catastrophic violence. Opportunity often intersects with trust to facilitate crimes and meticulous investigation. Leveraging both modern forensic techniques and traditional detective work remains crucial in delivering justice. Lingshawa's calculated familial betrayal and Wahanka's opportunistic, violent robbery may differ in context, but both reveal the devastating consequences of human impulses untempered by morality or empathy. Legacy of these crimes persists not only in the legal precedent set and the execution of justice, but in the cautionary narratives they leave behind. Communities, investigators, and society at large are reminded that human behavior is complex, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerously influenced by resentment, greed, or desperation. Awareness, vigilance, and moral integrity emerge as critical safeguards against repeating history, while the stories of the victims serve as enduring reminders of the fragile balance between trust and vigilance, family and betrayal, ambition and restraint.